And welcome back to Coast. George Noory with you with our special guest, R.J. Spina. R.J. is a true leader and metaphysical teacher. He has healed himself of a permanent chest-down paralysis. We'll have him talk about that. Severe chronic illness and life-threatening conditions through his own authentic transcendation. His teachings, wisdom, guidance, and revolutionary self-healing and self-realization techniques have already changed and saved the lives of many people across this planet. He has dedicated his life to the freeing and healing of humanity on all levels. RJ has started his own not-for-profit. It's called the Human Advancement Through Higher Consciousness. And he teaches self-healing, self-realization courses as well. Website linked up at coasttocoastam.com. His book is called Supercharged Self-Healing. RJ, welcome to the program. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, George. It's my pleasure.
Tell me what happened to you, this permanent chest-down paralysis.
So this was the beginning of 2016. I spent a couple of weeks in the hospital. I was diagnosed with sepsis. I was told that I really wouldn't live another 48 hours.
Oh, jeez.
And on top of the sepsis, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which was news to me, hypothyroidism, pancreatitis, thyroiditis. And I was there for a few weeks. They were giving me really strong antibiotics to try to take care of the sepsis. And lo and behold, I got discharged in about 2 weeks, but 6 weeks later, the antibiotics were not working, obviously, and I became permanently paralyzed from the chest down. And I required life-saving surgery, which was a laminectomy, which is where they scrape off the infection off the spine. But once the spine is damaged, and I was already paralyzed before they did the surgery, the spine itself has no self-repair or self-healing mechanism. It's almost like a jelly, a gelatinous substance, and as soon as it's touched, it's permanently damaged. So when I had awakened from emergency surgery, I was immediately told by the surgeon that no one recovers and that the condition was permanent.
That's amazing. Yeah, sepsis can kill you, to be sure, and so many people have died because of that dreaded bacterial disease. My God! And as you said, if the antibiotics don't kick in, you could be toast.
Yeah. The prognosis was dismal, to say the least, but I knew better.
Now, how did you fight this?
Well, I mean, I think we got to give it a little context, George, in the sense that when I was a little kid, I used to just what we now understand as astral projection or leaving your body. And so I would do this naturally without effort or certainly without teaching. As soon as I would just sort of relax, I would just literally be out of my body. And this kept sort of happening over and over again. And first I would just be next to my body, and my body would be sleeping. Then I'd be on the ceiling. Then I'd be on the roof of my parents' house. And then pretty soon I realized, as you know, being pure spirit, that I could go anywhere and do anything. And so it became totally normal for me as a kid to leave this realm and to go into different realities, different frequencies, different dimensions. And it felt to me as if when I would have these travels, I would retain the information or the wisdom, and even as a little kid. So this kind of understanding, these metaphysical understandings, and being able to leave my body and use my energy is normal. I came into this life this way. I mean, my last name is Spina, which means spine. So it's not a coincidence by any chance that I gave myself a challenge in this lifetime to be able to overcome permanent paralysis. And George, the only way I can describe what occurred upon awakening from emergency life-saving surgery is that I had awakened into what is known as authentic cosmic consciousness, and the healing was like a muscle memory. I immediately remembered how healing works and what to do. And when I was a kid, I used to say, if I ever get sick, I'll just heal myself, which is a ridiculous thing to say. But I did say it because I knew this talent or ability or understanding was inside of me. And, you know, as a kid, I certainly couldn't bring it out. But once the need had arisen, and obviously it had arisen, I was permanently paralyzed and in horrible, horrible shape. But I literally had awakened into my own cosmic consciousness, and everything came back to me. And I told everyone. I told the ICU nurse, the neurosurgeon, my doctor, the nurses, the physical therapists. I said I would heal myself, and I described it in detail in terms of what I would do. And I even said, believe it or not, that in 100 days I'll walk unassisted. And in exactly 100 days I walked unassisted. And all this is documented and verifiable. There's a video on my website that's time-stamped, so you can actually see myself unparalyzing myself. It was a muscle memory, George. It all came back to me.
Were these medical professionals in shock when you healed yourself?
Yeah, beyond shock. I went to go visit the neurosurgeon a few months afterwards, and I was already able to walk. I certainly wasn't sprinting, but I was able to walk. And I remember I went to go visit him, and he literally said the word ginormous three times in a row, because I think he was literally, he is a brilliant man, I think he was literally at a loss for words. He had never seen anything like it. And I said, remember I told you that I was going to do it? He goes, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Could this also have been considered a miracle, RJ?
We can call it that, but George, I would say it's metaphysics. I would say this is explainable, it's repeatable. The healing technique that's in the book that I call the Ascend the Frequencies healing technique is exactly what I did for myself. It's a repeatable, robust process that really has to do with accessing your own higher consciousness and then harnessing your energy properly. And this is the same teachings and understandings that countless people literally all over the world have used to help heal themselves, and I simply guide them in the process and assist them. So we can call it a miracle for sure, but it's in essence, it's just actual metaphysics.
And is it more science than supernatural?
Yeah, it's science because it has to do with, we could even address it in terms of how Tesla laid it out for us with vibration, frequency, energy. And you can say we're working with the same understandings, except we're now working with our own vibration, our own frequency, and our own body of energy. And when we start to access it properly, there really is no limitation in terms of what we can do. And I mean that literally. You can use me as an example, and essentially me overcoming permanent chest-down paralysis is really the permission slip for other people to now start doing the same thing for themselves.
Well, we're going to get into how you do these things, RJ, as well. What does the wording higher consciousness mean to you?
I would say it's everything that is outside of the intellect and therefore the five senses or sensory perceptions. So our body is attuned to the local environment, and it's attuned to the lower three frequencies within the first full dimension, and those three bottom frequencies band together to sort of form height, weight, and width, which gives us what we call a three-dimensional reality. And so our body is attuned to the local environment, which is how we're able to incarnate here. So the higher consciousness is really what we actually are. And that is attuned to all the way up to God, source, or creator, whatever word you want to use. And so it's when we transcend what I call body consciousness, which is just the reliance upon five physical senses and then the sensory data that comes in. And what forms from that is called the intellect, which is really nothing in terms of what your higher consciousness is capable of. So what we really are is higher consciousness that's having a human experience, and then we reduce ourselves to body consciousness, which is just five sensory perceptions and the intellect.
Not everybody has the ability to heal themselves. We all have the wherewithal, but not everybody can do it. Why not?
Well, there's two things there, George. Everyone does have the ability to do it, but we're all going to pass away at some point or not, and that's part of our life plan. So we give ourselves opportunities. And my understanding is that we have 7 different termination points or exit junctures within an incarnation that correlate to the 7 main chakras. So when the soul has determined it's done enough, it's simply going to leave the body, and it will avail itself of one of these termination points. But in terms of the ability to access our higher consciousness and harness energy in ways that we just haven't been taught, I think there's really limitless potential in terms of what people can do. I've worked with people that have been sick for decades and have tried everything: Western medicine, Eastern medicine, sound bowls, crystals, you name it. And then when they start working with their own higher consciousness and harnessing their energy, they make recoveries that doctors and everyone else would have said is impossible.
Can this also be used, RJ, for other things rather than just healing by tapping into, cognition and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are lots of people that I work with that don't even contact me for healing. They contact me in terms of their own self-realization or self-awareness, and to be able to use these teachings in terms of being able to achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve in their life. These principles are universal, and that's why I said it's just metaphysics. It seems like a miracle from the outside looking in, but when you start to work with it, you understand it's just a repeatable, robust process, and you can use these teachings for any form of achievement, healing or otherwise.
What about faith? How important is that?
Faith is one of the four directions of consciousness that I talk about in the book. Faith is hugely important because it's the connection to something greater that's already within us. And so there's a massive difference between faith and belief. In fact, George, metaphysically, faith and belief are polar opposites. Mm-hmm. For me, belief is anything whose landing spot lies outside of the self. And so belief, by definition, is actually disempowering. Faith is the opposite of that. Faith is the, direct connection to something deeper and more powerful within yourself. So when you start to access faith, really it's almost like the stepping stone to be able to really do anything, because you are now connected to something greater than yourself.
You have called the ego EMI. What does that mean?
I call it the ego-mind identity. Because I think that's a more accurate understanding of the ego. And so I like to say the ego-mind identity is a limitation program that runs by thinking. And we've all heard, what's the antidote to thinking? Meditation. So the ego-mind identity is essentially based upon our identifications, and the foundation of the EMI is always the body. So, and that's why when we always think of healing, the first thing we think of is physical healing, which I think is interesting because we identify with the body. And then the other identifications with beliefs, concepts, ideologies, so-called knowledge, the accumulation of all of our identifications, ego, mind, identity, that makes up our limitation program, because all those things are not actually what we really are. We're not the body, and we're certainly not what the body's sensory perceptions perceive. And so that makes up what I call a limitation program. And that limitation program literally runs by thinking and by using meditation in a whole new way, which is what we do in the book and what I teach. We're able to transcend the ego-mind identity. And this now leads us, George, into things like authentic self-realization, which is another word for enlightenment, and authentic self-healing. And it's all by transcending the ego-mind identity.
Is the ego good or bad, RJ?
Oh, the ego, it's a good question. It's normally just a limitation, really, because it's based upon identifications. So in that sense, the ego is very limiting. But we can use our energy properly, and our energy really is our will. And so the association with anything here would be egoic, but we can harness it in a way to achieve certain things. But the key, George, in terms of that is to understand our motivation behind what is driving the achievement, whether it's a low frequency, which would be an EMI-driven activity, or is it something that is derived directly from the self or higher self or the higher consciousness. And in that sense, we're harnessing our body of energy and our body, but we can use the egoic mind to our advantage, but only when it's understood for what it really is.
And don't most people take the ego and get it out of context? They think the ego really is just somebody's personality?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I just think it runs much deeper, George. That's why I call it the ego-mind identity. It's the subconscious programming, too, that happens when we incarnate here. It's the identifications with the body and everything that's here. And so it runs deeper, and it's one of the reasons why we have to bring the subconscious into the conscious mind in order to transcend it. The ego is much more than just the human persona. It runs deeper than that.
R.J. Spina with us. His book is called Supercharged Self-Healing, a revolutionary guide to access high-frequency states of consciousness that rejuvenate and repair. How do we get into those states, R.J.?
It's actually rather simple, and we can just do one right now. It takes 2 seconds, and I call these things magic tricks, real magic tricks, because they are real magic. It changes the energy immediately. So, George, we can just do it together because it takes 2 seconds.
All right.
All you have to do is pretend you just arrived here. No past, no future.
That's it?
And your mind stops. There's no way to think without a past or a future.
There's nothing almost.
That's right. And stay with the nothingness. And the longer you stay with the nothingness, the higher consciousness literally starts to unfold. And the whole key to transcending the ego-mind identity is to stop the limitation program of thinking. And the way to do that is meditation. But there's simple, powerful ways to meditate like that one, because you can't think when you pretend that you just arrived here, no past, no future. And so this is really the key, is learning how to move our energy out of our mental body, which is actually what happens. If we could see this, and it is possible to see this, not with our physical eyes, though, when there's no energy in the mental body, there's no way for the mind to think. And so this is part of the key about moving our energy, and this is sort of the foundation of the Ascend the Frequencies healing technique. You now learn how to command your energy in a way that human beings aren't currently taught.
Is this one of the techniques of many?
Yeah, that's just one little exercise in terms of just pretend you just arrived here, no past, no future.
Do they all need to follow a chronological step?
No. What the most important thing about it is, in the beginning of the book, I talk a lot about the ego-mind identity so people can truly understand what it is. Because most of us identify with our thoughts and identify with our feelings. But if we were our thoughts and feelings when they pass, we would pass too.
How important, RJ, is positive thinking, good karma? Does that have a role?
I would say no thinking is the key, George. Not even so much positive thinking. Healing occurs prior to thought, prior to belief, and prior to emotion. It's spiritual fiction that we heal through positive thinking and beliefs. The healing actually takes place before the energy actually goes in that direction. So certainly positive thinking is nice, but you can't heal yourself through positive thinking. The healing begins before you even think.
Is this what you call the Ascend the Frequencies healing technique?
Yeah, this is the beginning understanding of it, because once we stop the mind from continually moving forward, the sicknesses and diseases that we have acquired no longer have any momentum to keep going forward. And so this is one of the understandings that's a real paradigm shift, is that I've discovered that all disharmony comes from disharmonious thought patterns. So once we actually stop with the thought patterns, there's no momentum for the energy to keep going that's going in the wrong direction. It's like you put a pause button on your sickness and disease once you're able to, quote-unquote, meditate and stop thinking. Now, once we've put the pause button, George, we can then start using our energy directly to kind of reverse, if you will, that momentum. And so that's kind of part of the understanding of the Ascend the Frequencies healing technique.
What is it about the techniques that makes it work?
Oh, you're accessing what you really are. You're accessing what people call the soul, and you're accessing your higher consciousness. The cure for all that ails humanity is the soul. There's nothing out there that's going to cure the body. Nothing originates in the physical, and that's why there's nothing really curative in this realm. So we really have to go to the essence of things, the essence of the self. And I like to say the higher consciousness is the architect of our form and the chemist of our biology. And when you're able to start to do this, this is just the beginning point of stopping the mind. Some of the protocols or exercises, we then use our energy, the same energy that we use to think and emote and animate the body. We're then going to use that very same energy to actually elevate our consciousness, raise ourselves in frequency. So we're really just going to do the opposite of what we've always been doing. And when you start to do the opposite of what everyone's been doing, the results are what you termed and what other people term a miracle.
All right, we're going to come back and chat more with you, RJ, on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast, where we will take calls next hour with RJ Spina about these amazing healing properties and share a story with us on something that you may have gone through. And welcome back to Coast. George Noory with you, along with RJ Spina. We'll take calls with RJ next hour. How many people do you think, RJ, have gone through what you have gone through and have cured themselves? Using that word.
Yeah. I'm not sure, George. I know. Permanent chest down paralysis is it's unusual. Type 1 diabetes, and then not taking any more insulin and hypo. I don't take any medications. It's probably highly unusual, but there always has to be someone who does it first, and then once someone does it first, it gives everyone else permission to do it for themselves. It's kind of like Roger Bannister. It was impossible to run the 4-minute mile. Like, don't even bother. It's humanly impossible. And then, of course, he does it. And then 6 weeks later, someone does it. And since then, 20,000 people, including high school students, have run a sub 4-minute mile. So once it's been downloaded into the collective consciousness, it gives everyone else permission too. So hopefully, part of the purpose of this incarnation is to be able to prove that I could put myself back together again, and then offer to humanity the step-by-step process in which I use so they can avail themselves of it for themselves.
And this can be used for much more than just healing properties, can it?
Yeah, much more. This can be used for any achievement. Mine was obviously it was. I had to focus on healing because my situation was dire, to say the least. And,
right. You didn't have much of a choice.
Yeah, this was it. And obviously everything I ever heard from very well educated, very well meaning people who really only had the best interests for me. I mean, they told me what I was trying to do was absolutely impossible, and that I was delusional, and that I probably hadn't accepted the fact that I was a permanent paraplegic. But the truth of the matter is, I was well beyond the 5 senses and the intellect, and I was connected to something that is currently not really understood. So once we start applying these metaphysics, George, we can do this for any achievement. It's about harnessing yourself properly and not leaking our energy, and energy is power, in excessive thought, emotion, and behavior that doesn't take us to where it is that we need to go. It's kind of like when you set a GPS to go somewhere, you don't totally disregard the directions and I'm just going to make a left here, I'm going to make a right here, I'm going to stop here, I'm going to pull over and just wonder if I'm going to get any closer. If you did that, you'd never get to your destination. So part of what these teachings show people is how to never waver in your will or your focus. And this is the key to any achievement, George, healing or otherwise.
Absolutely. And I guess then you can use it to get a better job, a relationship, just about anything you want to do.
Literally, yeah, because once you start to understand yourself better and work with yourself properly by harnessing your energy, everything is energy. We use energy for everything. So the key to ultimate, if you want to call it success, is to learn how to master your energy, because that's all we ever use, to think, to emote, and to animate the body. So once we harness it properly, we can do anything, and we can use it for anything.
Tell me about your thoughts about life after death, RJ.
Well, I get this question a lot. George, I would say that life and death are concepts, and that consciousness is eternal. It's literally just a different state of being, and that's all it is. And once we learn how to use our higher consciousness properly through meditation, we can access these realms rather easily. And this is something that, as I alluded to earlier, George, I was doing this as a kid. Certainly, I wasn't trying. I wasn't taught. It wasn't something I was trying to accomplish. It would just happen naturally. So this is, it is what is. The life and death are concepts. Consciousness just continues. That nothing ever disappears. It just removes itself from our sensory perceptions which are simply attuned to the lower frequencies, or what people call the third dimension, but it's really the third frequency. Once you use your higher consciousness, everything is still there. You can really access anything. And so that's, to your point about you can use these teachings and these understandings for anything you can. Life and death, it doesn't really exist. Certainly not for me. In a very tangible way, it doesn't exist for me at all.
What do you think of the dream state, RJ, and its relationship to this too?
Well, the dream state, it can be a couple of different things, George, because sometimes really what happens is that we are experiencing an alternate reality or a parallel reality. Sometimes what's happening is our subconscious is simply working something out in a safe environment, in the sense through a dream, instead of having it actually happen in physical reality where there's actual consequences to the vehicle, to the human form. And also sometimes it's really what we call angels, but they're really our guides and helpers, are actually just working with us by partaking in scenarios within when we're in a dream state to help us understand ourselves and work through something. So dreams say a lot, but we have to start to understand that it can be various different things, including parallel conditions and parallel realities.
Absolutely. There's no question. Great job. Why is meditation so important?
It takes us out of the low frequencies. So what we were talking about before, George, so the body, the physical body, is attuned to the local environment or the lower three frequencies of physical reality, which is the physical universe, which is where you and I are right now. But the self, what we really are, is attuned literally to God, to Source, to Creator, whatever word you want to use. And it's meditation that allows us to detach from identification with the body and then therefore thoughts and sensory perceptions. And as you start to detach from sensory perceptions, you're now into what people call meditation. And another way to look at what meditation really is, I like to say the self, or what we really are, is meditation, because it's what exists prior to thought, prior to emotion, prior to the body. And it's the self that has all the love and wisdom. It's everything. It's whole. It's complete. It's a direct fractal of God. It's not lacking anything. And when we start to access this directly, and that's what the book teaches, we can do anything. Literally, we can do anything when we start to work in this way.
Yet it doesn't work for everybody. Why not?
From my experience, George, is that people just haven't been taught properly. They really have not been taught how to do this. It's no one's fault. I mean, we are horribly miseducated about everything. And then on top of that, we're incredibly over-medicated. So people don't do this because they don't know how to do it. Or I should say, their beliefs and identifications are so strong that they refuse to have an open mind and to understand that there's far more limitless potential than in the way that they're currently operating. Interesting take.
And where does God play in this role, RJ?
Well, it's all God. We're inside of God. Literally, the multiverse is a structure within God itself that God created within itself. There's structured God, and then there's sort of uncreated or unstructured God. As a way to, as an analogy, if we imagine like we took our lower half, the belly button down, and we just kind of hollowed ourselves out, and there was no bones, no blood, no tissues, no muscle, no nothing, and we literally just created something within ourselves in order to understand ourselves. So that's kind of my direct experience with what God and the multiverse is. The multiverse is within God, and all of it is within God. Everything is a creation of a creation of a creation, but the whole thing is God. Even what we call good and bad, God actually welcomes all experience, because God learns through its creations, and every experience that can be had, there's something to learn from it. So it's all God, the whole thing, everything.
Some more techniques, the one that you went through with me, can you just verbally just tell us what some of the others are?
Sure, yeah. One that I like to talk about is, in order to get your energy back and to detach from getting caught up in everything, because when you're attached to something, that's actually your energy. So this is super important to really understand this. So when we identify or attach ourselves to something or someone, That's actually our energy that's being used. And once you're attached to something or someone, you're kind of locked. You're locked here. You can't go past what you're attached to. It's like Spider-Man shooting his spider web to something. He's now attached to that. So one of the ways that we can transcend anything, including illness, including paralysis, I mean, you name it, is to detach from everything, including the body. And so another way to do that, and it sounds funny, but just pretend everything is a boring movie.
Simple as that.
Now, yeah, and it sounds funny, but let me explain, because something happens when we do this. We all know what it's like when we get caught up in a movie. Okay, so because our energy is attached to what's going on screen, whatever happens on screen, we go for the ride because we're attached energetically. We're identifying with what's going on. So when you're attached, you're no longer in control of your life because you're attached to something. Now, if you want to be powerful, once again, and we all are immensely powerful, you have to pretend everything is a boring movie. Because what happens, we all watched a boring movie. We don't care what happens. We don't have a vested interest. We no longer care. We're no longer attached. So that means, metaphysically, George, the energy that we were using to be attached now comes back to us. Detachment is power. That's the energy. So when we start to pretend, and I know it sounds funny, but just try it. Pretend everything is a boring movie. All of a sudden, if you become sensitive when you do these kind of things, you'll actually feel your energy return to you, and it sits just beneath your belly button and above your groin. When we're incarnate, that's the gas tank. That's literally where it sits. And martial artists talk about this. Their chi, and they say it comes from the kidneys area. That's almost 100% correct, but it's in that general area, but it's actually in the front. So pretend everything is a boring movie. All your energy returns to you, and now you're powerful once again.
Can you use these techniques, RJ, to build up your immune system to fight things like COVID?
You can use, yes, George. Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. Of course. So the higher you raise your vibration, you become, in essence, more and more invincible. The higher frequency you are, the less anything can stick to you. And so anything, and I mean anything can stick to you. I'll give an analogy. So think of H2O, right? So when it's ice, when it's at its slowest or coldest or lowest vibration, it's solid, and everything sticks to it.
Right.
Right? Then it's still H2O. Then as it rises in temperature or rises in frequency, it becomes water. It's less sticky. Then it becomes steam, and then it's vapor. You don't even see it, and nothing sticks to it. So when we do this for ourselves, the same thing applies. As we raise our vibration and frequency, there's really nothing of low frequency that can attach to us, that can get inside our body of energy or our physical body.
Yet we make these choices, don't we?
We do. We make these choices, but mostly out of societal conditioning and programming and loss of the direct connection with our own higher consciousness, loss of the connection with the direct knowingness. And so we've traded knowingness for beliefs. And that's really what the fall of man really is. The fall of man, George, is the fallen frequency. When we were existing in a much higher frequency, in a much more holistic and aware state of consciousness, we didn't use beliefs because we tangibly understood. And so as we've dropped in frequency, we've replaced this direct connection with our own knowingness and our own higher consciousness, and we've literally traded knowingness for beliefs, concepts, ideologies. And there's no truth in these things. There's no wisdom in these things. There's no love in these things, and there's no healing in these things either.
If somebody dies at 50 as opposed to someone who lives until 80, what happened? Why did that person go at 50, generally speaking?
Yeah, so George, all of us, we have part of our life plan is that we give ourselves 7 different exit points or termination junctures that we can take. And they're related to the 7 chakras. So it's literally in our life plan. We have 7 different times that we can sit with and the ego mind identity cannot access this. And actually anything I'm talking about has nothing to do with the intellect or the 5 senses. It's all higher consciousness, tangible understandings. So the person who avails themselves of exiting their incarnation at 50 is literally because they map that out in their life plan, and the soul has determined, you know what? I've done enough. I've learned exactly what I wanted to learn. I've experienced exactly what I wanted to experience, and now I'm going to end the incarnation and return home. So that's how that works. We actually, all incarnations are suicide missions. So it's just when the soul feels it's done enough, it avails itself of one of those opportunities where it can leave the incarnation.
These techniques that people can try, they don't take long at all, do they?
No, and that's exactly right. And it's because it's the truth. The truth is instantaneous. It should be direct, and it should be tangible. It's not some mental machination and something you have to figure out and you have to wait a while. It's direct. It's immediate because we're working with what is. We're working with the self directly. Esoteric terms called the self. I call it sentience, but it's the same thing. No, it doesn't take long at all. What it takes is discipline and dedication. It took me 100 days to literally put myself completely back together, and my body was completely and utterly destroyed. It wasn't even just permanently paralyzed from the chest down. I was riddled with chronic disease and illness and even other life-threatening conditions like autonomic dysreflexia, which a lot of paraplegics and quadriplegics die from complications of autonomic dysreflexia. And I had to learn, it was almost like it was a very yogic practice to gain control of my breathing, my body temperature, my heart rate, and my pulse. Because of the damage to my spine, it was out of control. But all of this was accomplished in 100 days, and this was, about as severe as it gets. People, when they dedicate themselves, we get good at what we repeatedly do. When people do these exercises, they're simple, but they're so powerful. And inherent in simplicity is an elegance and a power. And when you work with it properly, the results are, like you said, a miracle.
Should you do them daily as a routine?
Yeah, people ask, like, RJ, how long should I do this for? So in the book, I lay out each. There are 7 different main exercises that I did myself repeatedly on myself to heal myself. So each one you can do 20 minutes, 45 minutes a day. And this is what it takes. Think of it as like a meditation practice or a yoga practice or going to the gym. You get results. The more that you put into it, the more results you get. The beauty, George, of this stuff is that it's effortless. You can do these exercises all day. And
you don't have to really think about it. You just do it.
That's exactly right. It has nothing to do with thought. That's what's, revolutionary about this. We're working with our own higher consciousness and our energy, which is what exists before we misuse our imagination and turn it into thought, emotion, and behavior.
RJ, we're going to take a break and come back and take calls with you next on Coast to Coast AM.